All right, we're going to go ahead and get rolling. Welcome, everyone, to tonight's presentation. It's always a pleasure to present to you all. Um, let's get this clicking through here. Okay. For those of you who have been on our presentations before, welcome back. For those of you who are new, welcome. A little bit of background about ourselves and our company. My name is John Mantilla. I'm the CEO here at Parco, stands for Pension Americans Retirement Company, and we do retirement and financial planning for anybody with a pension, but especially those who work for the federal government. We work with folks across the country and around the world, no matter what stage of their career that they're in, whether they're just starting out their career with the government, whether they're in the middle of their career, wanting to make sure that they've positioned themselves right, given maybe a life change. And then certainly work with a lot of folks near the end of their career and as they enter retirement, wanting to make sure that they've positioned themselves well to enjoy their golden years. So no matter where on the spectrum that you fall, we work with folks no matter what. A couple things to note before we get started. One of the things we really focus on trying to do here at Parco is take all the complex and uncertain things that relate to financial planning, retirement planning, life insurance planning, investments, what you need to do, and try to make it simple and easy for you to understand. Because we know that there's a lot going on, there's a lot of moving pieces, and you all have other things you're focusing on that aren't this. And so all this stuff is really important. We always want to make sure that we're making it digestible for you in a way that you can understand. So throughout the presentation tonight, you'll notice these QR codes. Go ahead and scan that QR code whenever you'd like. I'll also in the chat window here add a link to our platform at goparco.com. You can go to goparco.com, create your account, log in. It's totally free and start doing a lot of the planning like we're talking about today on a more broad level, tailored toward your individual situation. And that dovetails really nicely into what we're going to be talking about today, which is end of year financial housekeeping. There's a lot of, we live on a calendar base. And so there's a lot of things that make sense to do before the end of the year, right? There's like deadlines that come up. And so, given that it is the last month of the year, we wanted to make sure that we talked about that. So there are things that you need to do that we could get them cooking for you before 12:31. So tonight we'll talk about how your leave works at the end of the year and what to strategize around that. Retirement account contributions, opening Roth IRAs. We'll talk about FEGLI and life insurance planning. We'll talk about FSAs, and then we'll talk about how to get started on doing a lot of this stuff, especially with the timelines coming around. So let's start by talking about leave. So when it relates to leave, people ask us all the time, what should I do with my annual leave? What should I do with my sick leave? Now, we have said this many times on past presentations is that federal employees, especially, are different than most Americans because of many of the benefits that you have as a government employee. The fact of the matter is that you guys have annual leave and you have sick leave. Those are two distinct benefits. And most Americans don't have that. Most Americans just have PTO. And so when it comes to your annual leave, there's some unique strategies to plan around, especially as the end of the year approaches. Now, when it comes to the end of the year, you can roll over at most 240 hours of annual leave. Any amount more than that is use or lose. So if you're, let's say, mid-career and you're not planning to retire this year and you have 312 hours right now, well, you should make a plan to try to use that annual leave before the end of the year because there's a maximum amount that you can roll over. Sick leave, on the other hand, works differently. How much is the maximum that you can roll over sick leave? Unlimited. You can roll over all of your sick leave every year. This is why some federal employees end up having two, three, we've even seen people having 4,000 hours of sick leave upon retirement because they can accumulate an unlimited amount as they go throughout their career. I'll plug this as well. It's always more valuable to use your sick leave while you're working than to retire. You get way more value out of using it while you're working. So if you need to use it, use it. And any unused sick leave that you have, there's a formula that OPM uses, will be counted toward your time and service to increase your pension. So now let's talk about your TSP and investments. And I do see a couple people asking some questions in the Q&A section. Throughout the presentation tonight, you can ask questions in the chat window or in the Q&A section. Myself and my teammate Lauren, who's also on with us tonight, will answer any of those questions there, or we'll answer them at the end of the presentation during the Q&A section. So now let's talk about TSP and investment. So there's some good end of year deadlines, end of year things to keep in mind when it comes to your TSP and investments. So for 2026, the retirement contribution limits are $24,500 with an $8,000 a year catch up. So if you're setting your contribution limits going into 2026, or you're trying to max out for the year, for this year, the maximum amount that you could put into your TSP is $31,500. So if you're over 50. So if you're approaching the end of the year and maybe you want to make sure you're maxing that out, that's how much that is. For the IRA for 2026, the max contribution limits will be $8,000. So if you're trying to max out your IRA, that's something also to keep in mind is, hey, how much have I put into my TSP? How much have I put into my IRA? Do I have extra funds around to really push more money into there before the new year rolls around? We also recommend everybody open up a Roth IRA. And I know that within the TSP itself, you can have your own Roth TSP. This is talking about in a Roth IRA outside of the TSP to have in addition to that in retirement. And Roth IRAs are really useful, just like Roth TSPs are useful because they allow you for a lot of financial flexibility. Roths, as a reminder, are funded with pre-tax dollars. I'm sorry, funded with after-tax dollars, dollars that have already been taxed, and then they grow tax deferred um, and actually tax-free forever. They're really also powerful as a legacy planning tool because if your beneficiaries inherit a Roth, they never have to pay taxes on that money. They'll have to take it out within 10 years of inheriting it. They never have to pay taxes on it, which is really powerful. However, Roth accounts are subject to a unique vesting requirement. So to have access to all the benefits of the Roth, to have access to all the growth, gains, and interest in that Roth account without any uh, taxes, you need to have had that Roth account open for 5 years, and you must be over age 59 and a half. Now, age 59 and a half, that's not something you can really change, right? Like, that was determined the day you showed up on Earth. However, the 5 year rule is one that we can, there's like some kind of loopholes around here. And let me show you what we mean. So it has to do with how the IRS considers the year that you open up the Roth account. So the IRS will just basically look and say, hey, how many calendar years have you had a Roth account open? That's what qualifies for the 5 year rule. In calendar years, and I mean that like specifically like how many 2020s have you had account open? So let's take the example of somebody that opened their Roth account the 1st of January of this year. Well, when January of 2026 rolls around, January 1st of 2026 rolls around, the IRS will say, well, look, you had a Roth account open in 2025, January, and you had a Roth account open in 2026. So you've had it open for 2 calendar years. Now, this person was proactive. They got one opened right at the beginning of the year. It's a great New Year's resolution. That's wonderful. However, for those of you that don't have a Roth account open yet, there's kind of interesting strategy because the IRS really only cares about what calendar year you had the account open. So let's say instead you open the account at the end of the year. You opened it on 12/31 of this year. So within the next 14 days. Well, you open it on New Year's Eve. On New Year's Day, that will count as your second year having vested because you had a Roth account open in 2025 and you had a Roth account open in 2026. So you had the account open for 2 days, but you get the same credit from a vesting perspective as somebody who's had their account open for much longer. So that's one of the little things I always like to mention at the end of year financial housekeeping is like, man, like if you haven't opened one yet, you get a lot more leverage opening it in December than you do opening it in June. So as the end of year approaches too, it's a great time to also consider your FEGLI and your life insurance. So um, especially as the holidays are getting around, especially as Christmas is coming, oftentimes we see folks kind of think about whether or not they still need their life insurance. And if you want to reduce or drop it, now is a great time to do so, as it can save you lots and lots of money in the long run. So let's take an example of somebody like option B, Brian. So when we talk about how much evaluating your FEGLI and life insurance can save you, let's, this is a good archetypal example. Brian is 57 years old. He's in good health. He makes just shy of $60,000 a year. He has five multiples of option B, which means that he has five multiples of his salary. So Brian says, hey, look, he never thinks about it, or he's like, hey, like, how much am I going to end up paying for this option B coverage? I don't really even know if I need it. Well, over the next 10 years, for somebody like Brian, he'll pay over $30,000 just in premium. Over the next 20 years, if he kept it, he'd pay over $100,000 in premium. If he kept it another 30 years, assuming he lived that long, of course, he'd pay almost $300,000 in premium. He'd have almost as much money coming out over the next 30 years as his total coverage amount. And obviously, at past age 97, it's even more money. So, one of the reasons why we bring this up is kind of like an end of year financial housekeeping is that if you sit down with your spouse, you're sitting down with your family, you're saying, hey, look, house is paid off, kids are grown, maybe I don't need all this life insurance. Now kind of puts you in the mind to say, hey, look, let's drop that option B because that's money that you can use for yourself or save for yourself to to make your retirement more comfortable. So, especially if you don't plan to keep it for the long run or you don't have a big medical issue where you really need the option B, um, now's a great time to consider changing that. Then on top of that, there's your FSA dollars. So for your FSA, a majority of your FSA dollars are user fees. You can roll over 660 FSA dollars every year, but the majority of your FSA are user fees. So if you do have FSA dollars and you have more than 660 of those dollars in your FSA account, um, you'll need to use those before the end of the year. So easy thing to not be paying attention to. And it's like, man, like that's just money that was gone. So we wanted to make sure we mentioned that as well. And then also we always recommend, just kind of like we'll obviously do one on New Year's resolutions, but as you're thinking about the end of the year and you're thinking about what your goals are as you approach retirement, you know, this can be a great time to kind of reset and slow down and think, how do you want to improve your finances and put you on a better path for the future? How do you want to live in retirement? Are you trying to maintain your lifestyle? Are you expecting it to change? Are you expecting to move? Like, how do you want retirement to look? How do you want to visualize? And then how much money will you need? If you said, hey, look, I want to live a lifestyle of a millionaire, like I want to spend $1 million a year. You can do that, but it means you need to have a lot more money saved. So these two conversations go hand in hand. It's like, hey, how do we want to live and how much do we need to get there? And then also, you know, are we prepared for any sort of negative event? Do we have enough savings to weather a storm? If there's uh, if there's an unexpected expense, do we have the resources to buttress our financials? And then I would say this is really, really important with all the folks we've worked with, especially with all the DRPs, the deferred resignation programs, and everything else that's been going on, is what do you want to do in retirement? We can help you a lot to figure out how the numbers look. Are you making the right decisions? Are you on the right path? How can you get on a better path financially? All of that, we can help a lot. But what you want to do in retirement, how you want to spend your time in retirement is something that's really worth considering. The only folks that we work with and benefit, like I would say, all of you on the presentation tonight should try to benefit from that experience we have. The only folks we ever see that kind of struggle with retirement are the ones who had a long career or had a career and never really thought about what life was going to be like after retirement. And so they end up having to like figure that out in retirement, which is not as easy as figuring that out and preparing for it before you retire. So that's the one thing I'd really, really say is a good thing to think about as you approach this end of the year is like, hey, what do I want to do when I am retired. And when you think about getting started, there's oftentimes all the stuff you have to think about your income planning, when you're going to retire, RMD planning, all this stuff. And as federal employees, you have to plan your FEGLI, your FEHB, your pension, your sick leave, all this stuff. And we've tried to really package that all into a nice, easy way to make this easy for you all and intuitive for you all to do this planning. And so when we think about sort of like the retirement planning checklist or your end of year checklist, things like opening up a Roth IRA, create your retirement plan, make sure you're using your use or lose annual leave, using your FSA dollars, evaluate and right size your FEGLI coverage, and then obviously planning a sustainable income and lifestyle strategy before you retire. These are all good things to be thinking about as the new year approaches. And what's nice is that our platform, the app on goparco.com, actually is built, all this kind of to-do list stuff is built right into the platform itself to make it easy for you to do so and tailored to your situation right there digitally at any time you want. So with that, I'm going to open things up for questions. I know tonight's presentation is a little bit different than the ones we normally do, just because this is more of a checklist. Um, but we always think it's really important, especially for those of you that maybe have been really busy this year and are like, hey, look, I need to make sure I get all my ducks in a row before the end of the year. We wanted to make sure we provided this space to do so. So with that, I'll open things up for questions. Da, 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 da. Vaughn, I see your question. I'm going to double check on that data point. Maybe, Lauren, if you want to try to check on Vaughn's question there, that'd be great. Keep those questions coming in. And keep in mind too, the catch-up contributions, the FSA rollover things like that, those change every year in terms of like how much you can roll over. So we'll update our system and we'll do an updated presentation next year for the new numbers. But the concepts are still the same. How do you go about opening a Roth IRA? There's a couple ways you can do so. You can work with us. We use Charles Schwab and a company called Altruist. Um, um, to open up a Roth IRA. You can also open one on your own at Schwab or Vanguard or Fidelity. The key thing is to have the account open. Um, it's like the thing that they'll look at is, did you have the account open? It can take 5 minutes. And John, if that's something you'd like help with, I'll have Lauren reach out and we can help you with that tomorrow. What percentage do we charge to manage folks' money? So our base asset management or wealth management fee or advisory fee, if we're managing your money at one of our custodians as your advisor, um, it starts at 1%. And then for higher net worth individuals, there's a sliding scale. And so that's something we can, depending on if you have a lot of money, of course, we can discount. Um, but our base fee is 1%, which we know is historically very low compared to the rest of the industry because we want to make things as easy as and efficient and as affordable for our clients as well. Let's see. Oh, I guess its slide hadn't been updated, but the 2026 IRA contribution limits are $7,500 for folks under 50. For over 50, you can do an additional 1,100 in catch-up contributions. Can you all hear me okay? Um, that just depends on how we invest. So we have plenty of different investment strategies that are very, very conservative, um, and really downside protected, so principal protected, you can't lose money, um, but are usually like they're not going to grow as aggressively. And there's other folks that want to have their money invested more aggressively, and they're okay with that market volatility. So depending on how you want to be invested and your risk tolerance, we can shape any portfolio that makes sense. Usually, our approach is very bottom up. So a client will tell us, hey, here's what my goals are. I'm making up an example here. Here's how I'd like to live. I'd like to leave a lot of money behind, and then I'd like to see the rest of my money grow as much as possible. And then, given those goals and the assets and the pension and the social security they have, we try to find the most efficient, meaning lowest cost way to achieve those goals with the right products and the right investments to do so. So, we've worked with people that are single men that say, "Hey, look, I want to be a I want to leave a lot of money behind to my nephews." And then we've worked with federal couples who say, "Hey, look, I need to um, uh, use all of our money for ourselves." Nothing wrong with those strategies. Your question on advice, I'm not sure we have to like do that basis, and how about now? Is now better? Okay. And Elena, we see your question too, so we've got it answered. If you do have other questions, just ask them in the chat window here. Happy to help. All right, I'll keep the presentation open for just a few more minutes, just in case there's a few extra questions that come through. We normally, so Naresh, our normal is to manage folks' money and provide continuous advice. We have had folks reach out to us to do sort of like um, a fee-based advising. We can do so, at just a different type of engagement. So if that's something you'd like, we can certainly set up a time to talk about that one-on-one. And I think that's something we should do. Um, so if it's not a problem for you, I'll have Lauren reach out to you and we'll get a time to go through your situation one-on-one. Okay, great question. So TSP is offering in-plan Roth conversion next year. Is this a good strategy for someone near retirement? So we've covered this before on some past longer Roth conversion webinars. So I can speak more to that. Like there's a lot to talk about with that. But the punchline is that generally we recommend folks hold off on Roth conversion until they're retired. And the reason for that is purely for the tax savings. So think about if you're working for the Department of Defense and you make $1,000 a year. So you're in a relatively high tax bracket. In retirement, you might net about the same that you're going to be making while you're working, but your gross income is going to go down a lot because your pension is going to be lower. Social Security has a special tax status. So your gross income from the IRS's perspective is going to be lower. And so, given that, we recommend folks do Roth conversion usually in retirement because the whole point of traditional retirement savings accounts is that you put money in and defer taxes from a period in your life when you're in a relatively high tax bracket while you're working, and then in a relatively low tax bracket in retirement. And so by waiting to do those conversions in retirement, you give yourself more to do those conversions. You have more headroom between your tax brackets. And that means that overall you'll pay fewer dollars in taxes, meaning more money net to you. So we think the in-plan Roth conversion strategy is going to be a really powerful extra tool in the financial planning tool belt. However, I wouldn't recommend you do it while you're working because if you do a Roth conversion while you're working, you're going to have your working income. And then on top of that, however much you convert, that's going to count towards your income for the year as well. I hope that helped. All right. Well, as always, it was a pleasure to present to you all this evening. As a heads up, this is going to be our last planned webinar of the year, but we might do one the week before New Year's Eve, 50-50 on that, but it won't be on that Wednesday. Um, so everybody have a great and Merry Christmas, and we will see you in just a couple weeks. So as always, have a great evening, and we'll talk to you soon. Bye bye.